This is Coffee with Kelly, a dynamic podcast that's dedicated to driving positive change in school safety. I'm your host, Ethan Woodman, Product Marketing Specialist for Crisis Go, and I'm joined by my esteemed colleague, Kelly Moore, Senior School Safety Specialist for Crisis Go. Our mission is to empower you with essential knowledge, tools, and inspiration required to foster a safer and more secure school environment. We hope this podcast will be the catalyst for transformation in your schools. Join us as we continue to dive into the world of school safety. Good morning, Kelly.
Good morning, Ethan.
We'll start off with a couple articles.
Okay.
Second one is quite interesting. So let's see, when was this? Well, the article was published yesterday. A 12-year-old in Florida is facing felony charges after she essentially used her boyfriend's phone.
Oh, I saw this.
To send like a threat to a teacher, I think. Like death threats to a teacher, and then like also made some comments of like shooting up her elementary school. Wild.
Yeah.
Wild. And I can tell you that if I ever did anything half as bad as that, I would even make it to the police department.
Before we get there to the threat part, 12-year-old and boyfriend.
Yeah.
In elementary school. I'll let that sit for a little bit.
That's pretty common.
Our kids are growing up way too fast.
Yeah. You sound like a dad.
I am. I saw that yesterday, and I was like, what? I get it, but there's pressures there. There's all kinds of different forces at play here that I'm sure we're not well aware of, but it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. And when I actually saw a video of her getting arrested, which I thought was odd because in most states that stuff's protected from.
Yeah, it's not even an adult yet. So it's.
Yeah, and not even a teenager yet, right? So I was like, that's weird. But I will say this, there are more and more states that are charging this type of crime as an adult crime. In California, it was very difficult to charge a juvenile under the age of 14 with any sort of crime. And the reason is that the reasoning at the time was that there was little ability for them because of their developmental age. This comes into play. Their developmental age really doesn't allow them to think about consequences, about what they're doing. And if they're developmentally, they are unable to, at some points, distinguish between right and wrong, then I get it. But now we see that those consequences, as our kids grow up faster and faster, they're more aware of consequences as well. They're more aware of things that are likely to happen if they do something wrong. And I always thought that it should be, there are certain crimes that are adult crimes. If you are a normally developed child, and I don't know what the correct term is, so that's the best, description I can give. But you are going and you are evolving and you are developing in the again, normal pathway. You know that killing somebody is wrong. You know that stealing is bad. You know that there are certain crimes that are certain things that are bad. And there should be consequences for specifically those crimes. I don't care what age you are. If you commit one of these adult crimes, you should be charged with it. Obviously, maybe not as punished as severely or charged as an adult. And, some states still have the death penalty. Obviously, that would not be appropriate, but there should be severe consequences to those types of things. This is not throwing a rock through a window at a vacant building. But there are some cases, and I'll give you, in Florida, there was an arrest of several juveniles who held a girl down and raped her. And one of the accomplices was also 12 years old, and they released him.
Like and the nothing?
pending hearings and stuff. But he was in custody and they released him. I think rightfully so. Community is in an uproar over this. And some of them are citing the age. They're saying, oh, but he's under strict house arrest. Well, that doesn't play well with a lot of people because there was little control over him when he was doing this, right? And actively participated. I don't know whether there was a sexual assault on his part, but he was actively participating in the attack itself, or at least, let's say, allegedly. But there's these things that you sit there and you go, you got to know that stuff is wrong. You got to know.
Yeah.
And we're taking that away. And I think we had this conversation a little bit last week about how if you're not going to hold the child accountable, then they're going to start holding the parents more and more accountable because of your lack of ability to control your child and their actions, and or you contributed significantly to their behavior that caused whatever it caused, right? So I think it was in Orange County that a mother is facing like 7 or 8 years in Orange County, California, time in prison because she let her child ride they call it an electric motorcycle because of the speed potential. But she was warned a few months back that these are dangerous and it's illegal for him to drive, but she continued to do so. So I think there's going to be more and more of these consequences in the future. So
yeah, it's got to be, you got to hold someone accountable to try to,
and I'm okay with that.
Persuade to limit this kind of behavior, I guess. So it's wild.
I mean, I saw another video about something happening, I think it was in North Carolina, where there were a bunch of juveniles in a mall taking over the mall. I think we talked about that again, but I think it was this past weekend, and they're jumping on top of a cop car. And I'm not sure what happens there.
Yeah, damaging a law enforcement vehicle, I'm sure, is probably not a good thing to do.
Yeah, but there was no fear of reprisal there. There was no fear. They were jumping all over the thing. And I'm not sure I would have been as calm. Just saying. And then, law enforcement's going to look like the bad guys, right?
Well, of course.
And so I think our society is putting their protectors, I'm going to say that, their protectors in a bad position. And when you do that, then stuff like this is going to continue to happen, because when we get into this situation, it's not good. And I don't care. There has to be law and order. There has to be consequences. And I think people are starting to figure that out. So yeah, I'll get off my soapbox.
Okay. So the next one, it's probably end up being the title of this, probably. I don't know. I said it before, so I'm going to say it again. So I know you're not supposed to talk. Kelly didn't understand this reference, so I had to educate him. But I know we're not supposed to talk about Fight Club, but today we're going to talk about Fight Club.
We're going to talk. I would gather that the potential title for this episode is going to be OMG! Exclamation point. You can't make this up. You can't.
I mean, out of all the stuff that we've talked about, this is definitely one of the most unique, one of the craziest things I've heard. I think still one of my favorites was the chicken wing story.
Right.
I will always remember the chicken wing story.
Fraudulently.
You guys haven't listened to the episode, wings. Just go search down, look for I think it's titled like chicken wings. So we're going to talk about Fight Club. Apparently a school director is being sentenced for being a ringleader of a child fight club. You heard that correctly. And you're thinking, maybe it's not what it seems. Maybe they're embellishing a little bit. Maybe marketing is getting out of hand. No, actually, this person was having the kids literally form a circle with a kid in the middle, and she instructed the kids to take random objects and beat the kid with objects. Again, I laugh because it's just the most insane thing I've ever heard. And so obviously the kid went to his parents, was like, hey, this is what happened. And the parents, and the craziest thing, it talks about the video shows. That's like what this article says. So like it's on video somewhere. It's crazy to me you would do that on video.
look at if you're gonna organize that stuff, you're not thinking straight. It's silly how silly people are. I do think we are seeing more and more reports of teachers being arrested for inappropriate relationships with their students, right? And this is just right along in there. It's part of that inappropriate relationship. And when we start talking about, we've talked about this many times before.
Yeah.
And what are we doing with our kids? And when I send my child to school, what percentage of fault does the school take when you're doing stuff like this? And this goes back to the beginning of this episode when we were talking about consequences and behaviors and so forth, and the inability for kids to form consequences and so forth, right? And it's never more evident than when you tell a child a secret.
This person instructed the victim to apologize to all the other students and told the students to never discuss what happened again. And also,
What was the impetus for this one? Did it say this particular fight? Why did the victim have to apologize? Was the victim being a bully?
It doesn't say.
Because it was, when we say Fight Club, generally speaking, when I hear Fight Club, I'm talking about two mostly consenting combatants, right?
Yeah, so it doesn't say why, and this person wasn't the only adult. There was 3 other adults that were apparently like involved in this, so they were also arrested.
Awesome, that's great. That's fantastic.
So four adults were involved in orchestrating this Fight Club.
Yeah, so I'm trying to figure out if this is more street justice. If the
would that make it okay?
No, but it would.
I was asking a rhetorical question for anyone.
Yeah, yeah, but it would almost make more sense, understanding when you have the victim apologize.
Sure. So, it doesn't say that, so I mean, it
right.
could be.
But it also, at points, we title the victim as the person who lost, or we identify the person who lost as the victim. And that's not always the case, right? The person who, especially in bullying incidences, it's not always the strongest person who's doing the bullying.
Yeah.
And, sometimes it just somebody's, messing with the monster, right? Poking the bear. And the bear's just kind of like, stop. And then all of a sudden it turns on them and they get surprised, right? They get emboldened by the lack of response. And I mean, I told you this before, and recently, I think I got picked on a lot because I restrained myself to a certain point, and then the bear woke up. And especially since I was the youngest of six kids, I had 4 brothers, and that was a constant power struggle.
I had 1 brother. I know how you feel.
Right. And so that was always a survival of the fittest type of thing. But yeah, I just
crazy.
Yeah.
This happened last year, but it took this long, I guess, to actually have court date or whatever. And so one of the interesting things is like the judge said that she's not allowed to have any like occupation in the future that involves children. Do we always do that? Because I feel like that needs to be more of a thing. It's like
it's not uncommon.
Anyone that does anything bad or anything that involves a kid, like you should not have any occupation that deals with children ever for the rest of your life.
Some of it's already built into the law, right? Okay. So you don't have to specifically articulate that. Other times you have to specifically articulate that.
Okay.
Like if you're convicted of a sex crime on a child, you become a registered sex offender, right? When they go to do your background, that's why we do fingerprints on education. Anyone who has any regular employment or regular contact with our school children, we have to do a fingerprint check. And it comes back and it would eliminate those people automatically from having the ability to work with kids. So it doesn't have to be specifically articulated in those cases because there's a requirement for background checks to weed those people out. It's all part of the normal process now.
I tell my own personal story of what I think might have been a Fight Club.
I think you're just sure.
Okay. I'm remembering another interesting part. It's not really part of the Fight Club, but it was within the same stuff.
Yeah.
So I was telling Kelly earlier, I'm like, I was like, I remember when I played on a soccer team for the school, and we like basically found like an old soccer field behind the school that was all junked out, like overgrown and wasn't used, and we as a team like went and like remade it and like painted lines and cut all the grass and like basically had our own little practice field, and the coach would train us pretty hard back there. One of the things we did was we would all get in a circle and like lock arms, and he'd call out two people, and the two people would go in and essentially have to like wrestle or like battle it out, and whoever like gave up would have to like run a lap or whatever. And it got pretty intense, especially when you get like the two people that like don't get along, and he like knew those people and he would like specifically call them out.
Did anyone ever get injured?
I mean,
that they needed treatment. I mean,
they didn't need any like medical treatment. I don't think they need to go to the hospital or anything. But I mean,
when I was growing up,
I don't think a bloody nose or a bloody shin or something was out of the question. That probably happened.
Yeah, when I was growing up, black eyes, bloody noses, bruises, and scraped knees was not a reason to complain.
But what was funny that I'm remembering now is there was a time where like I didn't know if I wanted to play from one of the seasons for whatever reason, and a lot of the kids were like, Ethan, you need to play, like we need you. And during the summer, what he would do to like as like a summer training, he would bring us all to like a camp, like it would be like an overnight camp, and then the first morning he would have us go out into the lake, and the lake was like super cold, and like you jump in there and it was like really, really super cold. And like I never understood why he did that until like our last soccer game where it was almost literally freezing rain and I couldn't even feel the ball on my foot anymore, and I was like, oh, this is why he had us do this. But anyways, the year that I missed, or the first part of the year that I missed, I did end up going back in, but I missed out on the camp thing. But apparently I think they went to like a different camp or something. And then when they went to the lake, and apparently the lake had some weird like algae parasite problem. Literally all the kids that went in the lake, their skin was like had this crazy red rash thing that like they all went to like the doctors for and stuff. Some got it worse than others, and I was like, man, I picked the right year to not show up.
It's awesome.
Yeah, I always remember that time.
Yep.
There you go. There's my personal story. So let's see. Awesome. We're just getting into May, so we're how many more weeks, or we got another month of school ish.
Some are out this week.
week.
Yeah, so this is the busy time for our schools. This is
we're all done with safety. We don't have to think about safety anymore until the new year, right?
So don't do anything. Just take a break.
Just chill. Kick your feet up. Sit on the beach.
There's lots to be done, right? So we'll just go over this real quick. Is when we're closing up the year, we have graduations. So don't forget about those activities, especially those kind of fun activities that put our kids at risk, right? Graduation, proms are going on all over the place. I think most of them are done, but proms are going all over the place. My kids, and in fact, I think I did. I don't remember them too much, but like field day at the end of the year where you just go out and have a bunch of sports activities. It's essentially 2 days of recess at the end of the school year. But those types of events attract a lot of people who aren't normally in your schools. So you have parents who are being chaperones. You have spring is about, so you have all this spring energy in your students, regardless of the age. So things can happen pretty quickly. If you have followed anything that we've done and or any of the news, I can't tell you how many school shootings we have had at proms, grad nights, graduation parties at the end of the school year, right? So
And that could be like from an internal source or an external source.
both.
Yeah.
Right. So especially when you have schools that are close together, right? So you have high schools that are close together. They're small communities, right? So in my community, nothing, as far as I know, nothing's happened here. But we have two high schools, and I'm not 100% on the geography. One sort of east and one sort of west side of the county. But the county's like 20 miles long or wide. It's not a huge county. And there's in the entire county, there's 45,000 people. Everyone knows everyone. Even if they don't go to the same school, they likely they go to church together. They are in youth organizations. There's not a whole lot for people to do. So they might go to the Y together. They might be involved in sports, swimming, swim clubs, that kind of thing. So they know each other. So the reason I'm saying that is because oftentimes now you're mixing the two schools. So because you have boyfriend, girlfriends, but they go to different schools, but they know each other. There might be rivalries from sporting events that they're close together, and so it's not uncommon to have those type of interactions. So just account for those and make sure that we're working through that. But that being said, not forgetting about what's happening currently, now we have to start preparing for the next year. 26, 27 is coming up. It's right around the corner. 25, 26 people are celebrating we're over. But safety's got to think about what went well this year, what and why it went well. I always say that. Not just that it went well. We need to understand, did we get it right or did we get lucky? What went wrong? And where are our opportunities for improvement? And this is the time that we codify those opportunities for improvement, whether it's a policy issue, a training issue, systemic issue, or an individual issue, right? And we have to put all of that into our efforts next year. That's the whole purpose of this and basis for the process of improving. So sometimes like I said, there's going to be new policies, new training, new plans. Your plans are going to change a little bit, new people in charge. So all of that stuff has to get integrated into your upcoming school year. And if you're changing your plans and you're changing your policies, you have to retrain that to everybody. You can't just say, oh, this is the new policy and stick it in a file somewhere or stick it in the back of your 3-inch binder that never gets moved. And oftentimes it just gets stuck in the back and not replaced, right? So you don't take the old one out and put the new one in. Even if somebody does pull that binder out, you're not inclined to look all the way to the back to see if there's any changes, unless that's the format of your book, is these are the new changes for the upcoming year that then get incorporated, those types of things. But that's what's coming up in this school year. What are the new systems? What do you have? Where are your gaps? What do you need security wise? Your communications platforms. I will say that we are getting more and more traction. There are more and more states that are exploring Alyssa's laws, and those laws are changing. So, and what I mean changing, they're evolving. So the first iteration of Alyssa's law was what they thought they needed at the time. And that was a single button, a panic button in each building. Obviously, that's not the case, right? Now they're moving more and more towards wearables. Some states specifically define what a wearable is, and others are a little bit more, their definitions are a little bit more expansive, right? So they can be different things. So understand that that's something that's coming. If it hasn't already been signed into law, it's coming. And I'm not here to say yes or no to Alyssa's law, but the intent of Alyssa's law, if you understand the intent and not just the basic mandates of it, then Alyssa's law is something that you should be looking at. And that's specifically, if something happens, how do I get the right help at the right spot with the right information so that they can address my problem with the right solution as quickly as possible? That's the intent. And I'm not sure that they've actually reached that in the law. I will say that I believe that Crisis Go has reached that ability with our offerings, with the alerting, the panic buttons, the reunification, the Connect platform for first responders. I think we're very close to meeting that intent, and not just you have to have a panic button and basic training for teachers. I don't think that's the intent there. So I think that's coming. So start looking at that, start finding the money for that, start finding how you're going to train that. And when I say train it, pressing a button 7 times is not training. That's not training.
Nope.
That it just doesn't meet the level for training. So that's what's coming. That's what you should be doing, is looking for that start of the year. And of course, when we're looking at the start of the year, what does Kelly say? Statistically speaking, you are more likely to encounter an active threat within the first couple of, let's say, few weeks of a return from a significant break, whether it's a 3 or 4 day weekend or a winter break, spring break, or summer break. If you are thinking in that context, then you will know, you will be prepared for the beginning of the school year, because you're going to train people to start looking for things right away, seeing those people. I'll tell you that there were kids, when I was going to school and when I was working for the schools, you could see right off. These kids are ready to be back. And then you have these other kids that they're just not wanting to be there.
So you're talking around the kids that are, look at me, I've had some issues in the year prior. And then, they go through summer break, they come back and they kind of have this hope of like, this is going to be a new thing. Like it's going to be better. And then after a little bit, they find out it's just going to be the same thing. And then they lose all that hope
quickly.
Yeah. So that's the kind of the thing you need to look out for, is that like real discouragement and kind of,
you likely know who that is already, right? So, and I'm telling you this because if you look at every media interview immediately after a shooting, I said every, but it's not every, but most.
Yeah.
It is. Yeah. I'm not surprised at all that kid did that. I'm not surprised. If anyone was going to do it, it was that kid, right? That person.
Then you get like the student accounts that say the same thing of like, oh, he's always been really quiet, or he's always been alone, blah, blah, blah,
Yeah. He's always struggled with friends, those types of things. You know who it is. This isn't rocket science. And especially if you've already identified somebody and they're maybe low level, but they're already on the pathway to violence, and you identify, just give them a quick look, talk to them and say, hey, how are things going? How was your summer? Get into creating those positive relationships and checking in on them and seeing what the vibe is, right? And at the risk of overstating this, when you look at if you have taken the opportunity to read Left of Bang, then you know that there's a baseline behaviors that you should expect. And you can determine that baseline pretty quick. Each year is going to be different. There's a different group of kids, so the dynamics are going to be different, but you can establish what the normal baseline is for the behaviors of those kids. And it's the anomaly that is identified. Something's going on here. What's going on? The behaviors are different. The vibe is different. And kids that were normally jovial and happy and glad to be there, they're a little bit more cautious. They're kind of subdued, their behaviors. They're avoiding certain areas that they would normally avoid. And you can kind of figure it out. And then we're not saying that if you see that, something's about to happen, but it is an indicator that you need to start exploring. So we'll leave it there.
I'll go back to, you were talking about events and stuff, and I think right about the new school year, we'll probably have a feature to help with event management.
Yep. That'll be fun. We'll see where that goes.
Another thing in the portfolio.
Yeah, it's the next evolution, I think, when we start seeing, because if we're looking at safety concerns and how do we address those, and developing technology to address those concerns. And we put it all on a single platform. I think that's a good way to go. So we'll see where that goes. So we've been seeing instances in safety and just operationally, things that have not been going well. And when you explore the processes that are involved in what's going on, and we're going to use this in the context of school safety. And we talked about this a little bit before, probably a couple of months ago, is we have all of these different entities that are working in silos, right? And one of the issues that we have is there is not one person who is taking charge.
Mm.
And when we have that, then people have a couple of things that happen to them. One, they're misguided because there's no direction, there's no accountability to other members or other partners or other pieces to that puzzle. There's no accountability to make sure they're doing their. There is some pointing the finger at people. It's not my job. I did my job. It's their job. And we see this all the time. It's their job. It's law enforcement's job to come in and keep us safe. Not if they don't understand that you're not safe now, right? And it's the fire guys, it's these guys, it's so forth and so forth, right? They start pointing fingers. And the reason they're doing that is because they believe they're doing their job. And they believe if they're doing their job, they're safe. And it's up to everyone else to fill those gaps, right? And I don't disagree with that, except for this. If you identify a gap or you're aware of a gap and it's not being filled because it's somebody else's responsibility, then you have to take responsibility to get that filled. The problem is, and we're seeing this more and more, the problem is that as soon as somebody says, well, that's your job, then, or that's this guy's job, well, why are you not forcing that person to do their job? Why are you asking them to let's sit at the table, right? And because, again, we don't have a single person who's responsible. There's not an identified position in all of these safety positions that we have that is responsible for getting everything done, right? And this is where I think we talked about this a little bit. This is where I think the emergency managers come in a wee bit. And I think that's their job, is to coordinate all this, to make sure what are the gaps? What are we doing that? I just have to figure a way to convince them that it is their job. And trust me, I'm working through that. But here's the other part of that. Because some people, not people, yeah, they're people, but they're also organizations that refuse to converse with other partners that are critical in this arena. And I'm talking about and I don't want to get into the politics of it, but there are many, many districts who refuse to have any conversation with law enforcement, right? Right or wrong, that's not the purpose of this conversation. But what is part of this conversation is if you are continuing to refuse to talk at any level with those people that you are going to call, and you're refusing to talk, and you have to call them. There is nobody else you can call when you have active violence going on in your school. Nobody else. If you are not going to have that conversations, you're going to suffer the consequences, right? So how do you have those conversations? I think you go to a neutral site. I think you have a neutral mediator, emergency management. I think you come in and say, okay, here, you guys don't have to get along. I get it. But when the need arises, you guys have to play well together, because your students, your citizens their lives are at risk, literally speaking. So I think there has to be some give on both sides. I think there's a need for somebody to be assertive there and say, look, I get it. I understand. I don't agree with you, but I get it. But if we're going to tackle this problem that we're having, then we have to work together when you call. And what that means is, even if it's just tabletops and scaled down versions of exercises, just so the administrators understand what's going to happen and how you're going to communicate and how you're going to get the information that you need when you need it to protect yourselves. There's just no other way around it. You can't call a different law enforcement agency.
No.
You just can't.
No.
Right? And there's no private sector security force yet that's going to come in and respond to your incident. It's just not going to happen. And the structure of the entire United States isn't set up for that. So what you're talking about is if you're going to refuse to do it, you're going to handle it. And trust me, you're not going to handle it well. You just don't have the capabilities to handle it.
What about, I'm going to play devil's advocate. What about the schools that have their own police?
I mean,
is that enough?
If they're trained properly, they're police, right? And so you have a relationship at being that you're employed by the same people. So it's not necessarily the same dynamic that I'm talking about because they have their own police force. So they have some control over the way that happens. But I will tell you that we have seen that structure fail. We've seen successes too, don't get me wrong, but we've seen that structure fail. I want to say this, but it's not universal. So take that for what it's worth. It's not universal. But there are oftentimes school district police that are not at the same level of readiness as your local law enforcement.
So it's interesting that you say that because there was another article that I didn't bring up, but I read earlier that, I mean, again, I laugh. It's not funny. There was an SRO that apparently, went to the bathroom and removed his firearm and left it in the bathroom, but then walked out.
And it was gone.
Walked out and then was like, oh shoot, I left it in there, and he came back and it wasn't there anymore. So then they had to essentially lock the school down and whatever to go find it.
Yeah, well, I don't think they found it yet.
Yeah, I don't think they did.
Yeah,
I think it's lost.
They went
lost.
Yeah, so
what
he realized
in the world?
He went back to the restroom where he was at after school was dismissed.
Oh no.
So he or she, I don't remember what it was, but
doesn't matter.
After they went back, it was gone, but it was after school had been dismissed. To me, I'm not sure how schools are today, but back in my day, I think even when I was at the school district, I don't remember one circumstance. I could be wrong, but I don't remember one circumstance where students used the same restrooms as staff did.
Interesting.
So,
okay. Yeah, like a staff lounge that had probably a little snack bar and bathroom. Okay.
Yeah. So they went
maybe
to the office.
Maybe it was just an emergency. They had to go run to the nearest one.
Yeah, but still, because most of those, well, at least when I'm doing it from my experience, I don't think I was ever actually in well, that's not true. But a lot of those school student bathrooms don't have doors on them anymore.
Hold up. What do you mean they don't have doors on them?
So so you kind of walk in and you kind of like an airport. So
okay.
So, but then the stalls themselves don't have doors on them because of all the problems that were occurring in.
How does that work?
Screwdriver, take the door off, and because that's where drugs were being done. That's where.
Well, I get that part, but like, do you just walk in? You can just blatantly see people using the bathroom. What?
That happens all over the place. But but there's even further than that.
Wow.
And maybe this is the circumstance, but oftentimes schools, because of the number of problems that they have in their bathrooms, don't allow children to use their bathrooms. They're locked, even during passing period and stuff. They're locked. And I'll tell you this, and this is universal. Not all law enforcement officers are the same.
No, they're people.
They're people. Their experiences are different. Their competencies are different. Many agencies are just going from call to call to call to call, and others have time to form relationships. Some obviously are full-time first responders. Other law enforcement agencies will go their entire career without being a first responder. They're second responders, right? So you're talking the federal agencies, you're talking state agencies where they're primarily investigative agencies or regulatory agencies, and they have powers of arrest. They have law enforcement, your fully law enforcement capabilities and identifications and powers and stuff. But they're not tactical in their response necessarily. So I think you have to understand who it is you're dealing with, right? So school districts, sometimes you get great people, sometimes you don't. It's just one of those things. I know an SRO, which is relatively low level. We talked about this before, low level in the structure, low level officer or deputy or what have you. Started his school district. He wanted to start a police department for the school district. So he left the agency that he worked for, created his own police department for the district so that he could become chief. So he was chief of police. He went from low level to chief of the police. So did all the accreditation and all that stuff. So
wow.
But when you don't have those experiences, I don't know how long you last in that position. I don't know how well you perform in those positions, but some people can do it. No doubt about it. I'm not trying to overgeneralize, but know who you're dealing with and understand that. But you need to have those relationships, because when it's time to press that button, you want your best opportunity to be successful. However, that's defined by that incident, because it is the incident that is going to define you, right? It's the incident that is going to define your legacy. If you don't respond to that correctly and you have taken a position, I do not want a relationship, they will come when I call 911, then you're setting yourself up for failure. And when I define failure is failure to the point that whatever you decide to do in the moment is it's not your best opportunity to be successful. Anything short of that, where you're talking the safety of your kids, is a failure in my mind.
If you enjoyed today's episode, please like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. And if you have any questions about what we discussed, leave a comment on our website at crisisgo.com. Thank you for joining us today, and we'll see you next time on Coffee with Kelly, a discussion on school safety.